The galaxy had turned dark for humanity. Once a rising star among the fledgling civilizations, Earth had been brought to the brink of ruin by an unstoppable enemy, the Korthan Swarm. The Swarm, an ancient and relentless force, devoured worlds and absorbed technology, leaving nothing but desolation in its wake. Humanity's colonies were the first to fall. Eden 7, the agricultural jewel of Earth's expansion, burned in the Swarm's first wave. Outposts on Proxima and Arcadia followed, their defenders overwhelmed despite their desperate resistance. Earth itself stood exposed, a fragile beacon of life against a tide of annihilation. In the shadows of desperation, humanity forged its last hope, the Eternal Vigil, a fleet of experimental warships designed to outthink and outmaneuver the Swarm. Unlike the brute force tactics the Korthans relied upon, these ships were built with adaptability in mind. Leading the fleet was Admiral Selene Voss, a tactical genius known for her unorthodox strategies. She stood on the bridge of the Solstice Blade, the flagship of the Eternal Vigil. Around her, holographic displays showed the grim reality. Earth's defenses were crumbling and the Swarm's forces were advancing. "Admiral, the Korthans have breached the outer perimeter," Commander Tobias Kale reported. "We're outnumbered 100 to 1. Selene's gaze didn't waver. "Then we'll make them fight on our terms. Prepare the fleet for Operation Umbra." Operation Umbra was humanity's last-ditch plan. The Eternal Vigil fleet would act as both decoy and shield, drawing the Swarm away from Earth while evacuations continued in secret. It was a near-suicidal mission, but it gave humanity one thing it desperately needed: time. The Solstice Blade led the charge, its cloaking systems flickering as it darted through the void. Behind it, smaller ships like the Starlight Spear and Aegis Flame executed precise strikes, targeting the Swarm's control nodes and disabling their cohesion. The Korthans were relentless, their biomechanical ships swarming like locusts. On board the Hive's Wrath, the Swarm's command vessel Overmind Nexis observed the battle with cold detachment. "Primitive tactics," Nexis hissed, its voice a fusion of machine and organic. "They delay the inevitable." But as the Eternal Vigil fleet danced through the battlefield, the Overmind began to sense something unusual. Humanity's ships weren't engaging in direct combat. They were luring the Swarm into an elaborate trap. On the Solstice Blade, Admiral Voss monitored the tactical display, her mind racing. "They think we're running," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Let's show them the cost of underestimating us." "Admiral, they're concentrating their forces on our flank," Tobias warned. "Exactly as planned," Selene replied. "Activate the Nebula Array." The Nebula Array was humanity's secret weapon, a network of drones that emitted dense clouds of ionized particles, blinding enemy sensors and creating confusion within the Swarm. As the array activated, the Korthan fleet found itself enveloped in a chaotic storm. The Eternal Vigil fleet struck with precision. Human ships emerged from the nebula clouds like phantoms, firing devastating volleys before disappearing once more. The Swarm, unused to such tactics, faltered for the first time. Back on Earth, evacuation efforts continued under the direction of Captain Mara Dren of the Haven's Reach. Her transport ships carried millions of civilians to hidden colonies beyond the Korthan's reach. "The Admiral's holding them back," Mara said, her voice steady as she reassured a frightened child. "She won't let them take us." But the Swarm was relentless. Despite the confusion caused by the Nebula Array, their sheer numbers began to overwhelm the Eternal Vigil fleet. Ship after ship fell, their sacrifices buying precious minutes for Earth's escape. "Admiral, we've lost the Aegis Flame," Tobias said grimly. Selene's expression darkened, but her resolve remained unshaken. "We're not done yet. Prepare the Solstice Blade for the next phase." Humanity's fleet had given Earth a glimmer of hope, but the battle was far from over. The Korthans had adapted, and their forces were closing in. "This isn't the end," Selene whispered to herself. "Not as long as we stand." The Korthans adjusted, their relentless swarms reorganizing despite the chaos. The Nebula Array's clouds were beginning to dissipate, revealing the Eternal Vigil fleet's dwindling numbers. On board the Hive's Wrath, Overmind Nexis observed with grim satisfaction. They delay only their extinction, it hissed, its tendrils interfacing with the command systems. Concentrate all forces on their flagship, crush their leader, and the rest will scatter. On the Solstice Blade, Admiral Selene Voss stood unwavering as the tactical display lit up with warnings. The Swarm's ships, now unified, were bearing down on the fleet's position. "Admiral, they've identified us as the primary target," Commander Tobias Kale reported. "Then let them come," Selene replied. Her calm belied the tension in the air. The remaining ships of the Eternal Vigil moved into formation, their battered hulls brimming with defiance. Each captain knew the stakes. They weren't just fighting for survival, but for the millions of lives depending on them. As the Korthans closed in, Selene activated the fleet's final contingency, the Celestial Prism. Hidden in the remains of a shattered moon, the prism was an experimental weapon capable of refracting and amplifying energy waves. It required time to charge, and Selene's fleet had to hold the line until it was ready. "Divert all power to shields and engines," Selene ordered. "We need to keep them in range of the prism's activation zone." The Korthans surged forward. Their biomechanical ships slammed into humanity's defenses like tidal waves, swarming frigates and cruisers. Explosions lit up the void as Earth's ships fought valiantly, their weapons tearing through the swarm even as their numbers dwindled. On board the Hive's Wrath, Nexis sneered as it watched the human fleet falter. "They are like sparks in the wind, flickering, insignificant, soon to be extinguished." But something strange began to happen. As the Korthans pressed their attack, the remaining human ships didn't retreat. Instead, they moved closer together, forming a tight perimeter around the Solstice Blade. "Admiral, the prism is at 70% charge," Tobias reported, his voice tense. Selene nodded. "We just need to hold a little longer. Order all ships to concentrate fire on their central command vessels. Force them to cluster together." The Eternal Vigil fleet fought with precision, exploiting every weakness in the swarm's formation. Human ships targeted the Korthans' control nodes, disrupting their coordination and funneling their forces into a tighter formation. "Admiral, we've lost the Starlight Spear," Tobias said grimly. Selene's gaze didn't waver. "Their sacrifice won't be in vain. The prism is our only chance." On the Hive's Wrath, Nexis felt a twinge of unease as it watched the humans' movements. "They are not retreating," it muttered. "Why are they not retreating?" Before the Overmind could issue new orders, the Celestial Prism activated. A brilliant beam of energy erupted from the shattered moon, refracting through the device's crystalline structure. The energy wave expanded in a cascade of light, engulfing the Korthan fleet. The wave didn't just destroy, it disrupted. The Korthans' biomechanical ships, dependent on their neural connections to the Overmind, short-circuited in the blast. Swarms of enemy vessels faltered, their movements erratic and chaotic as the prism's energy severed their connection to the Hive's Wrath. On board the Solstice Blade, the crew erupted into cheers as the tactical display lit up with enemy ships breaking apart. "It's working!" Tobias shouted. Selene's voice remained steady. "Good! Focus fire on the Hive's Wrath. Without the Overmind, the rest will collapse." The Solstice Blade led the charge. The remaining ships of the Eternal Vigil rallied behind it, targeting the Hive's Wrath with everything they had. Explosions ripped through the Korthan command vessel, and the Overmind's furious screams echoed across the void. "This cannot be!" Nexis roared, its final words consumed by the flames of its destruction. With the Hive's Wrath obliterated, the swarm crumbled. The Korthans, once an unstoppable force, retreated into the dark corners of the galaxy, their threat shattered. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Against all odds, humanity had triumphed. The fleet that was supposed to be a desperate last stand had become a symbol of resilience and hope. Admiral Selene Voss addressed her crew as they returned to Earth. "This victory wasn't just ours. It belongs to every life we saved and every world that can now dream of freedom. The Eternal Vigil kept humanity's hope alive, and it will light the way for the galaxy. The galaxy would never forget the day humanity stood against the darkness and won." The fleet that kept humanity's hope alive had done more than save Earth. It had rewritten the destiny of the stars.